At 23 years old, with barely $3,000 in savings and a mother dying 8,000 miles away, Jasmine Bryant mops floors in Seoul at 1 in the morning, unaware that a Korean crime boss is watching her dance through security cameras, about to change her life forever. She thinks she's alone. She thinks no one sees her steal these moments of joy in the middle of exhaustion. She's wrong. Yoon Taeyong sees everything in his building, and what he sees in this cleaner makes him feel something he thought died 3 years ago with his wife. Jasmine Bryant was 23 and tired in a way that went deeper than muscles and bones. She arrived at the Yoon construction headquarters at exactly 11 p.m., her overnight cleaning shift beginning as the last office workers filed out, their eyes sliding past her like she was furniture. She wore the standard gray uniform, her natural hair pulled back into a neat bun, her warm brown eyes showing the exhaustion that came from working nights and worrying days. At 5'7", she moved with an unconscious grace that her current circumstances couldn't quite erase, her body remembering 4 years of intensive dance training even as her hands gripped a mop handle instead of a bar. The supervisor, Mrs. Kim, a stern woman in her 50s who ran the cleaning crew with military efficiency, handed Jasmine the keycard for the executive floor. "You'll handle the 20th floor tonight," she said in accented English. "The CEO's office is up there. Sometimes Mr. Yoon works late. If you see him, stay invisible. Clean around him. Don't speak unless spoken to. Understand?" Jasmine nodded, taking the keycard. "I understand." She'd been working for the cleaning company for 2 months, transferring from the lower floors now that she'd proven herself reliable and quiet. The executive floor meant better pay, an extra $200 per month that would go straight to her mother's medication fund back in Detroit. Every dollar mattered. Every single one. She took the elevator up, the building silent around her, 20 floors of glass and steel and money, so much money it permeated the walls. The executive floor was all dark wood paneling and thick carpet, original art on the walls, the kind of space that whispered wealth and power in every carefully chosen detail. Jasmine had learned to move through these spaces like a ghost, present but unseen, cleaning the evidence of business dealings she couldn't begin to understand and didn't want to. She started in the conference rooms, large spaces with massive tables and leather chairs that cost more than her monthly rent. She cleaned methodically, wiping down surfaces, emptying trash bins, vacuuming the expensive carpet in careful rows. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw the message from her mother's nurse. Insurance denied the new medication. Prior authorization rejected. The words blurred. Jasmine steadied herself against the conference table, doing the math she'd done 1,000 times. The medication cost $3,000 out of pocket. She had exactly $2,900 in savings. She was $100 short, and that wasn't counting next month's rent or food or the 100 other expenses that came with simply existing. She put the phone away, breathed slowly. There was no point in breaking down in an empty conference room at midnight. She'd figure something out. She always figured something out. That was what her mother said. "Baby, you always find a way." Jasmine wasn't sure she believed that anymore, but she couldn't afford to stop trying. By 1 a.m., she'd finished the conference rooms and the executive assistants area. The long corridor stretched before her, floor-to-ceiling windows on one side showing Seoul's glittering nightscape, closed office doors on the other. Mrs. Kim had mentioned the CEO sometimes worked late, but the floor was silent, every office dark except for one at the far end where light leaked under the door. Jasmine figured whoever was in there would stay in there. She was invisible. That was her job. She pulled her phone out again, not to check messages this time, but to plug in her earbuds. This was her secret indulgence, the small rebellion that made the work bearable. She scrolled to her dance playlist, music from her university days when she trained 6 hours a day, when Juilliard had offered her a full scholarship, when her future had looked like stages and spotlight instead of mop buckets and midnight shifts. The music started, something classical with a rhythm that her body recognized instantly. Jasmine began mopping the corridor, but her movements shifted, no longer just functional but expressive. She let her hips move with the music, let her arms extend in proper form, let herself remember what it felt like to dance not for survival, but for joy. For 3.5 minutes, she wasn't a cleaner. She was a dancer again. Her feet moved in patterns her muscles hadn't forgotten, her body flowing through the space with the natural grace that had once been her entire identity. She didn't know that in the lit office at the end of the corridor, Yoon Taeyong had just looked up from a contract because the security monitor on his desk showed movement in the hallway. Yoon Taeyong was 36 years old and hadn't felt genuine surprise in at least 3 years. He controlled the Yoon family operations in Seoul, a network of gambling dens, luxury nightclubs, construction contracts, and protection services that generated enough money to make him one of the wealthiest men in the city. The construction company was legitimate enough to pass inspection. Everything else operated in shadows he'd learned to navigate with cold precision. He sat in his office at 1:15 in the morning because sleep had become difficult after his wife died. Yuna had been 8 months pregnant when complications started. He'd been in Tokyo closing a deal worth 50 million, negotiating with Yakuza bosses, building his empire. By the time he'd returned to Seoul, both Yuna and their daughter were gone. He'd built walls after that. Not physical ones, but the kind that made feeling anything too dangerous to risk. Work was safer. Control was safer. Power was safer. He looked like control personified. Even at this late hour, he wore an expensive black suit, tailored perfectly to his lean frame, the kind that cost $8,000 and looked like it. His features were sharp and symmetrical, the kind of face that photographs called striking and people found intimidating. His dark hair was swept back from his forehead, not a strand out of place. His eyes were the color of good whiskey, calculating and cold, assessing everything they saw for threat or opportunity. The security monitors on his desk showed every floor of the building. He glanced at them periodically, a habit born from years of watching for threats, for rivals, for any disruption to his carefully controlled world. When movement caught his eye on the 20th floor monitor, he looked up expecting to see the new cleaner pushing her cart, methodically working through her shift. What he saw instead made him freeze mid-signature on a contract. The woman was dancing. Not cleaning, though she held the mop. Not working, though she moved through the corridor. Dancing. Her body moved with trained precision, turns executed with perfect form, arms extending in lines that spoke of years of practice, her entire being transformed by the music he couldn't hear through the camera but could see in every movement she made. Taeyong leaned forward, studying the monitor. The cleaner was young, early 20s maybe, African-American, her brown skin glowing under the corridor's recessed lighting, her body moving with a grace that didn't belong in a cleaning uniform. She pulled out her phone, he realized. She was listening to music, thinking she was alone, unaware that every movement was being recorded by cameras designed to catch far more threatening behavior than unauthorized dancing. He watched for 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. She finished the corridor, her movements never quite returning to purely functional. Each gesture maintaining some element of artistry, even when she was just emptying trash or wiping down surfaces. When she finally moved out of that camera's range, Taeyong realized he'd completely forgotten about the contract he'd been signing. Something had shifted in his chest, something he'd thought permanently frozen. It wasn't attraction exactly, or not only attraction. It was recognition. He'd seen joy. Real joy, the kind that existed despite circumstances, the kind that transformed mundane work into art for the simple reason that joy couldn't be contained. He hadn't seen anything like that in 3 years. He hadn't felt anything like that in 3 years. His late wife had danced. Not professionally, but she'd loved it, taking classes twice a week, coming home flushed and happy, pulling him into terrible attempts at teaching him basic steps. He'd been too busy for it most of the time, too focused on building his empire, on consolidating power, on becoming untouchable. He'd thought he was building security. He'd built a fortress with no one inside to protect. Taeyong picked up his phone, dialing his head of security. The man answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. Yes, sir. The new cleaner on the executive floor, Taeyong said, his voice showing none of the unusual emotion he'd just experienced, falling back into the cold control that had defined him for years. I want a complete background check. Everything. Education, employment history, family, debts, criminal record if any, immigration status, all of it. I want the report on my desk by 9 a.m. There was a pause. Is there a security concern, sir? No, Taeyong said, watching the monitor as the cleaner reappeared in another corridor, her movements back to normal now, efficient and professional. Not a concern. An opportunity. Just get me the information. He hung up, made another call. This time to his personal assistant, a woman who'd worked for him for 8 years and knew better than to question unusual requests. I need you to arrange something for me, he said. Tomorrow night, before the cleaning shift starts, I want the cleaner assigned to the executive floor brought to my office. Tell her it's routine, a performance review. Make sure she's not alarmed. Can you handle that? Of course, Mr. Yoon. What time? 10:30. Before her shift officially begins. And make sure no one mentions this to the cleaning supervisor. I don't want the woman worrying she's in trouble. Understood, sir. Taeyong ended the call, returned his attention to the monitors. The cleaner had moved to a different floor now, her cart visible as she worked through offices that belonged to his vice presidents and senior managers. She moved efficiently, no more dancing, her brief moment of joy apparently finished. She checked her phone again, her expression falling, shoulders sagging slightly before she straightened them with visible effort. Even through the grainy security footage, he could see the exhaustion, the weight she carried, the strength it took to keep moving. He'd built an empire identifying valuable assets. People, businesses, opportunities, anything that could be acquired and utilized to expand his power. He recognized value when he saw it. This woman was valuable. Her grace, her training, her ability to find joy despite obvious struggle, all of it suggested someone who could adapt, who could perform, who could be useful in his world in ways a simple cleaner could never be. More than that, though something in him resisted admitting it, she'd made him feel something other than cold calculation for the first time in 3 years. That alone made her worth investigating, worth acquiring if possible, worth whatever it took to bring into his carefully controlled sphere. Taeyong returned to his contract, signing it with his usual precise signature. But his attention kept drifting back to the monitors. The cleaner worked for another 5 hours, finishing her shift at 7 a.m. She left the building looking exhausted, her shoulders curved inward, her grace diminished by fatigue. She walked to the subway station, disappeared into Seoul's morning rush. He finally left his office at 8, going home to his empty estate in Gangnam, the massive house that had once held his wife and would have held their daughter, now containing only him and staff who knew to remain invisible unless needed. He showered, changed into fresh clothes, returned to the office by 9:30 to find the background report waiting on his desk. Jasmine Bryant, 23 years old, originally from Detroit, Michigan. Bachelor of Fine Arts from University of Michigan, dance concentration. Had been accepted to Juilliard's graduate program with full scholarship but declined acceptance. Entered the United States with her mother on tourist visa 4 years ago, overstayed illegally for 6 months before self-deporting. Returned to Seoul 3 months ago on work visa through the cleaning company. Mother, Sharon Bryant, age 53, diagnosed with systemic lupus, currently in Detroit under care of Community Health Clinic. Father deceased. No siblings. No criminal record. Significant debt, approximately $47,000 in student loans, $12,000 in medical bills. Current savings estimated at $3,000 based on bank account accessed through security clearance. The report included photos from her university dance performances. She wore elegant costumes, her body captured mid-leap, mid-spin, absolute control and artistry visible in every line. The photos showed what she'd been, what she'd sacrificed. The report stated clearly why she declined Juilliard. Mother's diagnosis had come the same week as her acceptance letter. She'd chosen survival over dreams. Taeyong read the report twice, memorizing details, understanding motivations. She was desperate, though she hid it well. She was capable, trained, educated. She was in the country legally but barely, her work visa tied to a job that paid minimum wage. She was exactly the kind of person who could be acquired, not through force but through offering what she desperately needed, a solution to impossible circumstances, a way out of the trap she'd built trying to save her mother. He picked up his phone, called his assistant. Is the cleaner confirmed for tonight? Yes, sir. 10:30. I told her it was a standard performance review for employees working in executive areas. She seemed nervous but agreed. Good. Make sure security knows to escort her up quietly. I don't want her feeling threatened. Of course, sir. Taeyong spent the rest of the day in meetings, negotiating construction contracts, reviewing protection payment reports, handling the 1,000 details that came with running both legitimate and illegitimate business operations. But part of his mind stayed on tonight, on the woman who danced when she thought no one was watching, on the opportunity she represented, on the strange feeling in his chest that he'd almost forgotten how to name. By 10 p.m., he was back in his office, the building mostly empty, waiting for the security escort to bring Jasmine Bryant to him so he could make an offer she couldn't afford to refuse. At 10:15, Yoon Taeyong reviewed the file one more time, studying the photographs of Jasmine Bryant in mid-performance, body suspended in perfect arabesque, face lit with concentration and joy. The contrast between those images and the exhausted woman pushing a cleaning cart struck him as almost obscene. Talent like this shouldn't be wasted mopping floors. Training like this deserved better than minimum wage and impossible choices. He could provide better. That was what he did. He identified valuable assets and brought them into his sphere of control. The intercom buzzed. "Sir, Ms. Bryant is here. Send her in." Taeyong stood from behind his desk, buttoning his suit jacket out of habit, presenting the image of control and authority that had served him well for 15 years. The door opened. A security officer, one of his most trusted men, escorted Jasmine Bryant into the office, then withdrew silently, closing the door behind him. Jasmine stood just inside the doorway, her cleaning uniform pressed and neat, her natural hair pulled back into the same bun he'd seen on the security footage, her warm brown eyes showing nervousness poorly concealed beneath professional composure. She was taller than he'd estimated from the cameras, maybe 5'7" or 5'8", with an athletic build that spoke of years of physical training. Even standing still, she held herself with unconscious grace, weight balanced perfectly, posture straight despite obvious tension. "Ms. Bryant," Taeyong said, his voice neutral and businesslike. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Jasmine didn't move immediately. She glanced at the chair, then at him, clearly trying to assess the situation. "Mr. Yoon," she said, her voice steadier than her expression suggested. "The assistant said this was a performance review. Have I done something wrong?" "Not at all," Taeyong replied. "Your work has been exemplary. This is about something else entirely. Please sit. This won't take long." Jasmine moved to the chair, sitting on its edge rather than settling back, body language screaming readiness to flee if necessary. Taeyong returned to his own chair behind the massive desk, the physical barrier between them deliberate. He wanted her slightly off balance, uncertain, receptive to what he was about to propose. He opened a drawer, pulled out the background report, placed it on the desk between them. Jasmine's eyes widened slightly when she saw the University of Michigan letterhead visible on one of the documents, recognition dawning that this wasn't a standard performance review. "I saw you dancing last night," Taeyong said without preamble, watching her reaction carefully. 1:15 a.m., 20th floor corridor. "You were listening to music, moving through your cleaning routine, but you weren't just cleaning. You were performing." His eyes held hers, dark and assessing. "You have professional training. Significant professional training, based on what I observed." Jasmine's face flushed, embarrassment and fear mixing visibly. She started, then stopped, clearly scrambling for explanation. "I'm sorry, Mr. Yoon. It won't happen again. I thought I was alone. I didn't mean to," she trailed off, realizing she was making it worse. Taeyong raised one hand, stopping her. "I'm not reprimanding you, Ms. Bryant. I'm curious. Someone with your level of training doesn't end up cleaning offices by choice. So I had my security team pull your background." He tapped the file. Jasmine stared at it like it might contain explosives. Bachelor of Fine Arts, University of Michigan. Dance concentration. Acceptance to Juilliard's graduate program with full scholarship. He paused, letting that sink in. "You declined. Your mother was diagnosed with systemic lupus the same week you received your acceptance letter. You chose to work instead of attend. Very admirable. Very rare." Jasmine's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. "How?" she started, voice thin. "How do you know all this?" That's private information." Taeyong's expression didn't change. "I make it my business to know about people who interest me, Ms. Bryant. Your background interests me. Your talent interests me. Your current circumstances, he gestured to the file, interest me very much. He leaned forward slightly. Your mother's insurance denied coverage for the new medication her rheumatologist recommended. The denial came through 3 days ago. The medication costs $3,000 out of pocket. You have $2,900 in savings. You're $100 short, and that doesn't account for next month's rent or any other expenses. Jasmine's face had gone from flushed to pale. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the expensive carpet. That's, she said, voice shaking now, anger cutting through the fear. That's none of your business, Mr. Yoon. My personal life, my family, my financial situation, none of that is your concern. I do my job well. I clean thoroughly. I don't steal. I don't cause problems. If you're satisfied with my work, that should be enough. If you're not, I'll resign right now. She turned toward the door. Taeyong spoke quietly. You're in the country on a work visa tied to your cleaning company employment. If you resign, the visa becomes invalid within 30 days. You'll be deported. Your mother will lose whatever financial support you're currently providing. The university loan companies will pursue collection, possibly garnishing whatever income she has. Leaving doesn't solve your problems, Ms. Bryant. It makes them worse. Jasmine stopped, her back still to him, shoulders rigid. What do you want from me? I want to offer you a different position, Taeyong said. One that pays considerably more than your current employment. One that would solve your immediate financial crisis and provide long-term security for both you and your mother. Jasmine turned slowly, suspicion clear on her face. What kind of position requires a background check this detailed and a meeting at 10:30 at night? The kind that requires absolute discretion, Taeyong said calmly. The kind that involves access to sensitive information and proximity to valuable assets. The kind where trust is essential and must be verified before any offer is made. He stood, came around the desk, leaning against its front edge, arms crossed. His expensive suit, his controlled posture, his sharp features, all of it combined to create an image of power and authority that he'd spent years perfecting. I need someone with very specific skills, Ms. Bryant. Grace under pressure. The ability to move beautifully and naturally in formal settings. Intelligence enough to observe without appearing to observe. Loyalty that can be compensated but must be absolute. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. This sounds like you're looking for an escort, Mr. Yoon. I'm not interested in that kind of work. I'm not interested in purchasing sexual companionship, Taeyong said, his tone sharpening slightly at the implication. I can acquire that easily and cheaply if needed. What I need is far more valuable. I need someone who can stand beside me at business dinners, charity galas, art gallery openings, the social events that are unavoidable in my position. Someone who can make appropriate conversation, move through high society settings without embarrassing me, maintain appearances of normalcy in a world that constantly watches for weakness. He pushed off from the desk, moving closer to her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to maintain eye contact. My world requires constant performance, Ms. Bryant. I need someone who understands performance at an instinctive level. Someone whose grace and training allow them to adapt to any social situation. You happen to have exactly that training. You happen to need exactly what I can provide. What exactly are you offering? Jasmine asked, her voice wary but no longer quite as defensive. In exchange for your presence at required social functions, approximately twice per week, you would live on my property in provided housing. You would receive a substantial salary. Your mother's medical expenses would be covered in full, including medications insurance won't approve. You would be trained in the specific requirements of my world, the etiquette and protocols necessary to move through it successfully. In return, you would be available when needed, loyal to my interests, and absolutely discreet about anything you observe. How substantial is the salary? Jasmine asked. 120,000 per year, Taeyong said. Plus full medical coverage for your mother, including specialists and experimental treatments if necessary. Plus housing on my estate, which would allow you to save your entire salary rather than spending it on Seoul's expensive rent. Jasmine's breath caught audibly. That's, she paused, calculating. That's more than I would have made as a professional dancer. For just attending events with you. For being someone I can trust in situations where trust is rare and valuable, Taeyong corrected. For representing me in social contexts where perception matters. For maintaining discretion about my business dealings. The compensation reflects the value of what I'm purchasing, which is reliability and loyalty in a world where both are difficult to find. Jasmine studied him, trying to read beneath the controlled exterior. Why me, she asked. You could hire a professional, someone who already knows your world. Why a cleaner who dances when she thinks no one is watching? Because dancers understand performance in ways others don't, Taeyong said. Because your training means you can learn what's needed quickly and execute it flawlessly. Because your circumstances mean you're motivated to succeed. Because I watched you find joy in mopping a floor, and that suggests a temperament that can adapt to unusual situations without breaking. And because I need someone who isn't already connected to my world, someone clean, someone who can be shaped to fit rather than bringing existing loyalties or obligations. He moved back to his desk, pulled open another drawer, retrieved a thick document. This is a preliminary contract, he said. It outlines the basic terms I've described. But before we discuss specifics, before you commit to anything, I need to know if you can actually do what I'm asking. I need to see if you can move through formal settings with the grace and confidence required. What do you mean? Jasmine asked. I mean, I want you to show me, Taeyong said. Prove you can handle the performance aspect. If you can, we'll discuss detailed terms, and you can make an informed decision. If you can't, you return to your cleaning position with no consequences. The offer expires tonight. No second chances. Jasmine's hands clenched at her sides. You want me to audition? I want you to demonstrate capability, Taeyong corrected. Consider it a practical assessment rather than an audition. Can you move like you belong in my world, or will you stand out as someone pretending? The challenge in his voice was deliberate. Jasmine's chin lifted slightly, pride overriding fear. What exactly do you want me to do? Taeyong moved to the built-in sound system along one wall, scrolling through options on the control panel. I'm going to play music, he said. Classical, the kind that plays at the formal events you would attend with me. I want you to dance. Not performance dance with leaps and turns. Social dance. The kind of movement that happens at black tie galas when people flow through spaces, when grace is expected but flashiness would be inappropriate. Show me you can be elegant without calling attention to yourself. Show me you understand the difference between performing for an audience and existing beautifully in a space. He selected a piece, something slow and elegant, strings and piano. The music filled the office, expensive speakers making it sound like a live performance. He moved to lean against his desk again, arms crossed, waiting. Jasmine stood in the center of the large office, in her cleaning uniform, facing this dangerous man who knew too much and offered too much. Her heart pounded. This was insane. She should walk out. She should refuse. She should maintain whatever dignity she had left. But $120,000. Her mother's medication covered. Housing provided. She did the math automatically. She could save nearly everything. In 2 years, she'd have almost $250,000. Her mother could have the best treatment. She could maybe, eventually, dance again professionally if her mother stabilized. The music continued, waiting for her. Jasmine closed her eyes briefly, took a breath, let her body remember what it had spent 4 years learning. When she opened her eyes, she'd shifted something internal, the cleaner fading, the dancer emerging. She began to move. Not the joyful, expansive movement from last night's corridor. This was controlled, sophisticated, the kind of grace that belonged in spaces like this office, with its expensive art and leather furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows. She moved like water, like smoke, present but not demanding, elegant but not showy. Her arms extended in soft lines. Her steps were measured and precise. She turned slowly, fabric of her uniform moving with her, and even in the plain gray fabric, she somehow looked like she belonged in a ball gown. She danced for perhaps 3 minutes, losing herself slightly in the music, in the familiar language of movement, in the relief of using her body the way it was meant to be used. When the piece ended, she stilled, returning to neutral position, breathing slightly faster but controlled. Taeyong hadn't moved from his position against the desk, but something in his expression had shifted. His dark eyes showed approval, calculation, and something else harder to name. You passed, he said simply. You more than passed. That was exactly what I needed to see. Jasmine felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. So what happens now? Now we discuss actual terms, Taeyong said. Now you decide if you're willing to enter my world in exchange for the security I can provide. Now you make the choice that will determine the next several years of your life. He pushed off from the desk, moved to the door, locked it with a decisive click. Not a threat, just ensuring privacy. Then he returned to his chair, gestured for Jasmine to sit again. This time, after a moment's hesitation, she sat back in the chair properly, no longer perched on its edge ready to flee. Something had shifted. The demonstration had changed the dynamic from interrogation to negotiation. Let me be very clear about what I'm offering and what I'm expecting, Taeyong said, his voice taking on the formal tone of someone outlining a business contract. 120,000 per year, paid monthly, deposited directly into an account we'll establish. Full medical coverage for Sharon Bryant, your mother, including any specialists, treatments, or medications she requires regardless of insurance approval. You'll move into the guest house on my estate in Gangnam immediately. It's fully furnished, approximately 1,200 square feet, private and secure. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, hands steepled. In exchange, you attend social functions with me approximately twice per week. These will be formal events, business dinners, charity galas, art openings, situations where my presence is required, and appearing alone raises questions about stability or vulnerability. You'll be trained by my head of household in proper etiquette, appropriate conversation topics, how to read rooms, and adapt your behavior. This training starts immediately and is non-negotiable. What about my work visa? Jasmine asked. It's tied to the cleaning company. I'll handle that, Taeyong said dismissively. You'll be employed by one of my legitimate businesses, paperwork filed properly, visa transferred and extended. Your immigration status will be secure. And what happens, Jasmine said carefully, if I meet someone? If I want to date? Have a relationship? Taeyong's expression hardened slightly. You disclose it immediately. Romantic partners are security risks. Jealous boyfriends cause problems. Questions about our arrangement cause problems. I don't forbid relationships, but I require transparency. Anyone you're involved with gets vetted. If they pose a security concern, you end the relationship or the arrangement ends. Non-negotiable. Jasmine absorbed that, recognizing the control implied. What if I want to leave? What if after 6 months or a year, I decide this isn't working? 60 days notice, Taeyong said. You provide written notice. I have 2 months to make alternative arrangements. Then you're free to go. All agreements honored. All payments made through the notice period. I don't keep anyone who wants to leave. That serves no one's interests. And what happens if I betray you? Jasmine asked quietly. If I tell someone about your business dealings? If I try to blackmail you? If I prove disloyal? Taeyong's eyes went cold, the warmth that had appeared during her dance vanishing completely. Then the arrangement ends immediately. You're deported within 72 hours. Your mother's medical coverage is terminated. The university loan companies receive information about your current income and location. Any savings you've accumulated is forfeit per breach of contract clause. And you'll discover that Seoul is a very small city for someone who's crossed me. I have long reach and longer memory, Miss Bryant. Betrayal is expensive. The threat hung in the air between them, unvarnished and absolute. Jasmine felt cold settle in her stomach. This man was dangerous. Whatever his legitimate business fronts, whatever his expensive suits and formal manner, he was someone who could destroy her life with a phone call. She was considering entering the world of someone who spoke about deportation and financial ruin with the same casual tone as salary discussion. But $120,000. Her mother's health secured. A way out of impossible mathematics and midnight despair. I need to think about this, Jasmine said. You have until midnight tonight, Taeyong replied, glancing at his watch. It's currently 11 p.m. In 1 hour, the offer expires. You either accept and we proceed immediately, or you return to your cleaning position and we never speak of this again. I don't wait. I don't negotiate. You decide now, or you decline forever. That's not enough time, Jasmine protested. It's sufficient time to recognize whether the benefits outweigh the concerns, Taeyong said. You're intelligent. You've already done the math. You know what $120,000 means for your mother's treatment. You know what security means compared to your current situation. The question isn't whether this is a good deal financially. The question is whether you can accept the terms required to access that deal. That's a question of character, not calculation. You know the answer already. Jasmine stared at him, hating that he was right. She had done the math. She'd done it the moment he said the salary. $120,000 was more than she'd make in 3 years at her current job. Her mother could have the new medication, could have the best specialists, could maybe, possibly, have years added to her life instead of watching it slowly drain away. And all she had to do was attend some events, look pretty, make small talk, represent this dangerous man in his dangerous world, ignore whatever she saw, keep whatever secrets she learned, become complicit in whatever he did to earn the money he was offering. She thought of her mother's last video call. "Baby, I'm managing. Don't worry about the medication. We'll figure something out." But her mother's face had been drawn, exhausted, pain visible beneath the forced smile. There was nothing to figure out. There was no money. There was only slow decline. Jasmine looked at Yoon Tae-yong, at his sharp features and cold eyes and expensive suit, at the power that radiated from him like heat from pavement. She thought of dancing in the corridor last night, that brief moment of joy stolen from exhaustion. She thought of 3 years of sacrifice and struggle. She thought of her Juilliard letter, abandoned in a drawer in Detroit. She thought of her mother saying, "You always find a way, baby." Maybe this was the way. "I'll need to see the full contract," Jasmine said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Before I agree to anything, I need to see every term in writing." Taeyong smiled, a small cold expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course. He pulled the thick document from his drawer again, slid it across the desk. "Read it carefully. Take the full hour if needed." "I'll wait." Jasmine pulled the contract toward her, began reading, and with each paragraph, understood more clearly exactly what she was agreeing to, exactly whose world she was entering, and exactly how much it would cost her if she ever tried to leave. Jasmine read the contract with the careful attention her university education had taught her, parsing legal language that tried to obscure meaning beneath formality. The document was 23 pages, dense with clauses and subclauses, but certain terms stood out with absolute clarity. Compensation was listed in Section 3. $120,000 per annum, paid in monthly installments of $10,000, deposited on the first of each month into a designated account. The first payment would be made immediately upon contract execution, meaning tonight if she signed. Medical coverage for Sharon Bryant was detailed in Section 4, comprehensive and startling in its scope. All treatments, medications, specialists, experimental therapies, and emergency care covered at 100% with no deductibles or co-pays. A private medical team would be assigned within 1 week of contract execution. Housing was Section 5. The guest house at the Yoon estate in Gangnam, 1,200 square feet, 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, private entrance. All utilities included. Fully furnished. She would have complete privacy except for routine security checks conducted monthly. No guests allowed without prior approval. Duties were outlined in Section 6 with meticulous detail. Attendance at social functions as required, estimated at 8 to 12 events per month. Formal attire would be provided. She would complete etiquette training with designated staff within the first 30 days. She would maintain appearance standards appropriate to formal settings, meaning professional grooming, fitness, and presentation at all times. She would make appropriate conversation with business associates without discussing confidential matters. She would present as Mr. Yoon's companion, the nature of which would be deliberately ambiguous, allowing observers to draw their own conclusions. Section 7 covered confidentiality. She would observe business dealings conducted in her presence, but would not record, photograph, or discuss them with anyone under any circumstances. She would sign a non-disclosure agreement as a separate document. Breach of confidentiality would result in immediate termination and legal action including, but not limited to criminal charges where applicable. Section 8 detailed termination conditions. She could leave with 60 days written notice. He could terminate immediately for cause being defined as breach of confidentiality, breach of loyalty, criminal activity, substance abuse, or behavior bringing disrepute to Mr. Yoon's reputation. If she terminated, all agreements would be honored through the notice period. If he terminated for cause, all benefits ended immediately and penalties outlined in Section 9 would apply. Section 9 made her blood run cold. Penalties for breach included deportation proceedings initiated within 72 hours, termination of medical coverage for Sharon Bryant, forfeiture of all compensation earned, and legal action to recover costs incurred on her behalf, including relocation expenses, training costs, and any medical expenses already paid. Additionally, her student loan servicers would be contacted with updated income information, her work visa sponsor would be notified of employment termination, and she would be added to a database of unreliable contractors shared among certain business networks in Seoul. The final section, Section 10, covered modifications and extensions. After 1 year of satisfactory service, compensation would increase to $135,000 annually. After 2 years, $150,000. The contract could be extended indefinitely by mutual agreement. Marriage or romantic involvement with third parties required disclosure within 72 hours. Pregnancy would result in immediate contract renegotiation. Jasmine looked up from the document, finding Yoon Taeyong watching her with the patient stillness of a predator observing prey. "This is a cage," she said quietly. "These terms, these penalties, this is designed to make leaving almost impossible once I start. It's designed to protect my interests," Taeyong corrected. "I'm making a substantial investment in you. Your mother's medical care alone could cost hundreds of thousands per year with experimental treatments. I'm providing housing, training, compensation, security. In exchange, I require assurance that investment won't be wasted or weaponized against me. The penalties reflect the value of what I'm offering." "You're buying loyalty," Jasmine said. "I'm compensating it appropriately," Taeyong replied. "Loyalty that can be purchased is more reliable than loyalty given freely. Free loyalty changes with circumstances. Purchased loyalty has contractual weight." He leaned back in his chair, dark eyes steady on hers. "I won't lie to you and claim this is altruism, Ms. Bryant. This is a business arrangement. You provide a service. I provide compensation. The terms are transparent. You know exactly what you're agreeing to. That's more honesty than most employers offer." Jasmine looked down at the contract again, at the neat legal language that would govern the next years of her life if she signed. Her hands trembled slightly. She thought about the corridor last night, dancing alone, that brief pocket of joy in the middle of exhaustion. She thought about her mother's face on their last video call, pain visible beneath forced cheerfulness. She thought about 3 years of sacrifice, of deferred dreams, of impossible mathematics and midnight shifts. She thought about Juilliard, about the scholarship letter she'd folded and put away, about the future she'd imagined before her mother got sick. Dancing on stages in New York, touring with companies, teaching master classes, building a career from her art. All of it gone, abandoned for medical bills and cleaning supplies and minimum wage survival. $120,000 wouldn't give her that future back, but it would save her mother. It would provide security she hadn't felt in 3 years. It would be a different kind of cage than poverty, but perhaps a more comfortable one. And if she said no, if she walked out of this office, returned to her cleaning shift, continued her current trajectory, her mother would decline. The medication would remain unaffordable. She would work herself to exhaustion for another 3 years, maybe 5, watching her mother deteriorate, knowing there was treatment available that she simply couldn't access. She would carry that weight, that guilt, that failure for the rest of her life. This man was dangerous. His world was dark. The contract made clear he operated in spaces where violence and control were currencies. Signing this would make her complicit, would make her part of whatever empire he'd built on fear and money. Her integrity would be compromised. Her independence would be sold. But her mother would live, would have a chance, would receive care that might extend her life by years. Jasmine realized she'd already made the decision. Had made it the moment Taeyong said $120,000. Had made it when he mentioned her mother's medication. The rest was just recognition catching up to reality. Morality was a luxury she'd learned she couldn't afford 3 years ago when she declined Juilliard. Survival required pragmatism. This was survival, just in a different form. She looked up at Taeyong. "I need a pen," she said, her voice clear and steady despite the chaos in her chest. Something shifted in his expression, satisfaction maybe, or respect. He opened a drawer, produced an expensive fountain pen, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent. He slid it across the desk to her. The weight of it in her hand felt significant, heavy with consequence. Jasmine uncapped the pen, turned to the final page where signature lines waited in neat rows. She signed her name carefully, the legal flourish she'd practiced for important documents. Jasmine Marie Bryant, 23 years old, dancer turned cleaner turned whatever this was. Companion, asset, purchased loyalty. She dated it, pushed the contract back across the desk. Taeyong took it, reviewed her signature with careful attention, then added his own below hers. His signature was precise and controlled, no wasted movement. Yoon Taeyong, crime boss, businessman, her new employer, her new owner in all but name. He stood, moved to a safe hidden behind a painting on the wall, some abstract piece that probably cost more than a car. He placed the original contract inside, returned with a copy that he handed to her. "This is yours," he said. "Read it as many times as needed. Remember every clause. Your compliance with these terms determines your future and your mother's." Jasmine took the copy, the paper crisp and official. "When does this start?" she asked. "Now," Taeyong said. He picked up his phone, made a call, voice shifting into Korean, rapid and authoritative. When he hung up, he said, "I've arranged for your belongings to be collected from wherever you're currently living. My assistant will handle lease termination with your landlord. A car is being prepared to take you to the estate tonight. Mrs. Park, my head of household, will meet you there and show you the guest house." "Tonight," Jasmine repeated, the reality of how fast this was moving hitting her. "I start tonight. Right now?" "The contract is executed," Taeyong said. "The arrangement begins immediately. Is there a problem?" Jasmine started, then stopped, realizing there was no point in protesting. She'd signed. The contract was binding. Her old life had ended the moment she'd written her name. "No," she said. "No problem. I should call my mother. Let her know I'm changing jobs. Moving. Use your own judgment about what you tell her," Taeyong said, his tone suggesting he already knew she wouldn't tell the truth. "But remember that deception is sometimes necessary protection. The less your mother knows about the nature of this arrangement, the safer she is if anyone ever questions her." The implication was clear. His enemies might target her mother for information. Ignorance was armor. Jasmine nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders alongside all the others. The intercom buzzed. "Sir, the car is ready. Send it to the executive entrance," Taeyong said. He looked at Jasmine. "Gather your things. Whatever you have with you. Mrs. Park will provide anything you need tonight. Tomorrow, a stylist will visit to assess your wardrobe needs for formal events. You'll begin etiquette training the day after." Everything moves quickly now. Jasmine stood, the contract copy clutched in her hand, her cleaning uniform suddenly feeling absurd. "What about my supervisor?" she asked. "Mrs. Kim, the cleaning company. Don't I need to give notice?" "Already handled," Taeyong said. "You're employed by Yoon Construction as of now, position listed as executive assistant for visa purposes. The cleaning company has been compensated for immediate termination of your contract. Mrs. Kim has been informed you've received a promotion. Everything is arranged." Of course it was. Men like Yoon Taeyong didn't leave details unmanaged. Jasmine followed him out of the office, down the corridor where she danced just 24 hours ago, to the executive elevator. They rode down in silence, the air thick with unspoken implications. When the doors opened on the ground floor, a sleek black sedan waited at the curb, driver standing at attention. "The estate is in Gangnam," Taeyong said. 30 minutes from here. Mrs. Park is expecting you. Rest tonight. Tomorrow your new life begins in earnest." He extended his hand formally. Jasmine shook it, his grip firm and warm, the first real physical contact between them. "Welcome to my world, Miss Bryant," he said. "I trust you won't regret this decision." "I hope I won't either," Jasmine replied. She got into the car. The driver closed the door with expensive precision. Through the tinted window, she watched Yoon Taeyong return to the building, his figure disappearing through glass doors into the lobby. Then the car pulled away, and she was moving through Seoul's nighttime streets toward a future she couldn't quite imagine. The drive took exactly 30 minutes as Taeyong had predicted. The car navigated through expensive neighborhoods, each block more exclusive than the last, until they reached a high wall with a security gate. The driver spoke into an intercom. The gate opened smoothly. They drove through, up a long curved driveway lined with carefully maintained landscaping, past a massive main house that looked like something from architecture magazines, to a smaller structure set back among trees. The guest house, the driver said in accented English, his first words of the trip. Jasmine got out, taking in the building. Smaller was relative. It was larger than any apartment she'd lived in, modern architecture with clean lines and large windows, surrounded by privacy hedges and lit by subtle landscape lighting. The front door opened before she reached it. "Miss Bryant," a woman said, bowing slightly. "I am Mrs. Park, head of household for Mr. Yoon. Welcome." Mrs. Park was perhaps 60, Korean, wearing simple, elegant clothes, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She radiated efficiency and authority tempered by warmth. "Please, come in. Your belongings will arrive within the hour. Let me show you your home." The interior was stunning. Hardwood floors, modern furniture in neutral tones, artwork on the walls that looked original and expensive. The living area opened to a kitchen with high-end appliances. 2 bedrooms, one with a king bed already made with luxury linens, the other set up as an office with a desk and bookshelves. 2 bathrooms, one with a soaking tub. Everything was clean, elegant, expensive, and completely impersonal. "Mr. Yoon has provided the basics," Mrs. Park said, gesturing to the kitchen. "Groceries will be delivered tomorrow. You may request specific items. Your schedule will be provided each Sunday for the coming week. I will handle your etiquette training starting Tuesday. Any questions or needs, you may reach me at any time." She handed Jasmine a phone, new and expensive. "Your new number. Mr. Yoon's contact is programmed. Mine as well. Security office. Emergency services. Keep it with you always." Jasmine took the phone, adding it to the pile of things she was accumulating. The contract. The keys Mrs. Park had given her. This new phone. Pieces of a new identity. "Thank you," she said. It's much more than I expected." "Mr. Yoon values those in his service," Mrs. Park said. "He expects loyalty and professionalism. In return, he provides well. You will find him a demanding employer, but a fair one. Follow the rules. Maintain discretion. You will have a secure future here." After Mrs. Park left, Jasmine walked through the guest house again, touching furniture, looking out windows, trying to make it feel real. Just this morning she'd been a cleaner. Now she lived in luxury she couldn't have imagined affording. The speed of it made her dizzy. Her belongings arrived an hour later, 2 security personnel carrying boxes that contained everything from her tiny studio apartment. It looked pathetic in these spacious rooms, her worn clothes and cheap furniture, her few books and kitchen supplies. Evidence of poverty in a palace. After they left, Jasmine unpacked mechanically, hanging clothes in the massive closet, placing toiletries in the marble bathroom. Then she sat on the expensive couch in the beautiful living room and pulled out her old phone, the one that wasn't new and programmed with Yoon Taeyang's contact information. She called her mother. The video connected. Her mother's face appeared, tired but smiling. "Baby, it's late there. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Jasmine said, forcing brightness into her voice. "Actually, everything's great. I got a new job. A really good job." Her mother's expression shifted to cautious hope. "What kind of job?" "Executive assistant," Jasmine said, the lies smooth and practiced already. "To a businessman here in Seoul. It's a live-in position. I'll be handling his schedule, accompanying him to business meetings and events. The pay is, Mom, it's incredible. It's enough to cover your new medication. Enough to get you better treatment." Sharon Bryant's eyes filled with tears. "Jasmine, baby, are you sure? That sounds almost too good to be true." "It's real," Jasmine said. "I start immediately. I've already moved into the provided housing. It's beautiful, Mom. You wouldn't believe this place. And the best part, he's arranging for you to see private specialists. Real doctors who can focus on your case specifically." Her mother was crying now, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I thought," she said, voice breaking. "I thought I was going to have to just manage. I thought we'd run out of options." "We haven't run out," Jasmine said, her own tears starting despite her efforts to remain composed. "You're going to get the treatment you need. You're going to be okay." "What about you?" her mother asked. "Is he good to you? Is this a safe position?" "He's very professional," Jasmine said, which was true in its way. "Very formal. I'll be fine, Mom. This is a good opportunity. This is going to change everything for us." They talked for another 20 minutes, her mother's relief palpable through the screen, Jasmine's guilt growing with each reassurance she offered. When they finally ended the call, Jasmine sat in the beautiful living room, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. She'd lied to her mother. She'd sold herself to a criminal. She'd entered a world she didn't understand for money she desperately needed. But her mother would live, would get treatment, would have a chance. That had to be enough. In the main house, Yoon Taeyong reviewed security footage from the guest house cameras, watching Jasmine unpack, watching her video call with her mother, watching her composure break after hanging up. He noted how she'd lied smoothly, protecting her mother with deception, exactly as he'd suggested. He noted how she'd cried after, the emotional cost visible. She was stronger than she looked, more adaptable. That was good. His world required strength and adaptation. He turned off the monitor, made a note to have her mother's medical team assembled by tomorrow afternoon, the best specialists in lupus treatment, with instructions to spare no expense. Jasmine had kept her part of the bargain. He would keep his. The contract was executed. The arrangement had begun. Tom would tell if she could handle what came next, but Taeyong thought she could. He'd built an empire on reading people, on identifying value, on acquiring assets that served his purposes. Jasmine Bryant was a valuable asset, and Yoon Taeyong protected what was his. Over the next 6 weeks, Jasmine Bryant's life transformed in ways that made her previous existence feel like a distant dream. The exhausted cleaner dancing alone in corridors at 1 a.m. became someone else entirely, someone who moved through Seoul's most exclusive spaces with practiced poise, someone who wore designer dresses and made small talk with millionaires, someone who stood beside Yoon Taeyong and made his cold world look almost warm. The training began the Tuesday after she'd signed the contract. Mrs. Park arrived at the guest house at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying thick binders and an air of absolute authority. "We have 4 weeks to prepare you for your first public appearance," she said, setting the materials on the dining table. "Mr. Yoon attends a charity gala 1 month from today. You will accompany him. Between now and then, you will learn everything necessary to move through that world without error." The curriculum was comprehensive and unforgiving. Formal dining etiquette consumed the first week. Which fork for which course, how to hold crystal stemware, proper napkin placement, acceptable topics of conversation during meals, how to pace eating to match the flow of the table. Jasmine practiced with full place settings Mrs. Park brought from the main house, expensive china and silver that made her nervous to touch. "You must appear as though you've dined this way your entire life," Mrs. Park said. "Hesitation reveals inexperience. Inexperience reveals deception." Mr. Yoon's world notices deception. The second week focused on social navigation. How to read a room. Identifying who held real power versus who merely appeared important. How to make conversation that seemed substantive while revealing nothing of consequence. Safe topics included art, travel, charitable causes, and carefully neutral current events. Forbidden topics included politics, religion, personal questions about family or relationships, and anything related to business specifics. "You observe everything and discuss nothing," Mrs. Park instructed. "Your role is to be pleasant, elegant, and forgettable. People should leave interactions with you feeling they had a lovely conversation, but unable to recall any specific information you shared." Jasmine discovered her dance training helped enormously. The physical grace was obvious, but more valuable was her understanding of performance, of inhabiting a role completely, of reading an audience and adjusting her presentation. She'd spent years learning to become whatever the choreography required. This was just a different kind of choreography, with higher stakes and no applause. The third week brought wardrobe consultations. A stylist arrived with racks of formal gowns, each more expensive than anything Jasmine had owned in her entire life. They selected 6 for the first month, elegant dresses in deep jewel tones that complemented her brown skin, styles that were sophisticated without being provocative, expensive without being ostentatious. The stylist also provided day wear, business casual pieces for less formal occasions, and comfortable clothes for her free time. Everything fit perfectly, tailored to her measurements with precision that spoke of serious money. Meanwhile, her mother's medical care had been arranged exactly as promised. A team of specialists had been assembled, led by Dr. Huang, one of Seoul's foremost experts in autoimmune disorders. Sharon Bryan had been brought to Seoul, set up in a beautiful apartment 3 blocks from the Yoon estate, and begun on the experimental medication her insurance had denied. Jasmine visited twice weekly, watching her mother's improvement with relief that sometimes made her cry in the guest house bathroom where no one could see. The guilt of lying about her employment gnawed at her, but her mother's strengthening health made the deception feel necessary, almost justified. The fourth week culminated in dress rehearsal. Mrs. Park arranged a formal dinner in the main house, inviting several of Yoon Taeyang's business associates and their wives. Jasmine wore one of her new gowns, a deep emerald dress with elegant lines, her natural hair styled in an updo that had taken 2 hours at a salon Taeyang's assistant had booked. She entered the main house for the first time since arriving, walking into a dining room that looked like something from a period drama, all dark wood and crystal chandeliers and paintings that belonged in museums. Yoon Taeyang stood when she entered. He wore an impeccable dark suit, his sharp features composed in an expression of cool approval. "Ms. Bryant," he said formally, "you look very appropriate for the occasion. Please, join us." The dinner lasted 3 hours. Jasmine deployed everything Mrs. Park had taught her, navigating 7 courses with proper utensils, making pleasant conversation with the woman to her left about a recent art exhibition, discussing a documentary on urban architecture with the man to her right, all while maintaining perfect posture and appropriate facial expressions. She observed carefully, noting how Taeyang controlled the room without appearing to control it, how certain glances between men conveyed entire conversations, how the wives watched her with assessment thinly veiled as friendliness. After the guests departed, Taeyang walked her back to the guest house, a courtesy she hadn't expected. "You performed well tonight," he said as they crossed the darkened grounds. "Several associates commented that you seemed very polished, very comfortable. That's the desired effect." "Thank you," Jasmine said. "Mrs. Park is an excellent teacher." "Mrs. Park says you're an excellent student," Taeyang replied. "Your dance training serves you well. You read the room instinctively, adapting to its rhythms." "That's rare." They reached the guest house door. Jasmine turned to face him, this dangerous man who now employed her, who had transformed her life in a month. "May I ask you something?" she said. "You may ask. I may not answer." "Do they know?" Jasmine asked, gesturing back toward the main house. "Your associates. Do they know this is an arrangement? That I'm not actually your—" She hesitated, unsure what word to use. "They know what I want them to know," Taeyang said, "which is that you're someone I trust in social settings, someone whose presence I value. The specifics of our arrangement are irrelevant to them. What matters is that you represent stability, normalcy, someone at my side which suggests I'm not isolated or vulnerable. Perception is currency in my world, Ms. Bryant. You help manage that perception." He left her at the door, walking back toward the main house with his characteristic controlled stride. Jasmine went inside, removed the expensive dress carefully, and sat on her couch in comfortable clothes, processing the evening. She'd passed. She'd performed well. She was doing what the contract required. But the weight of the performance, of maintaining the careful facade, left her exhausted in a different way than cleaning floors ever had. 2 weeks later came her first real public appearance. The charity gala was held at the Grand Hyatt, a glittering affair with several hundred guests. All Souls elite gathered to donate impressive sums to childhood cancer research, while wearing clothes that cost more than most families earned in months. Jasmine arrived in Taeyang's car, a sleek Mercedes with a driver and security following in a second vehicle. She wore a deep burgundy gown, her makeup professionally done, diamond earrings Taeyang had provided that she was terrified to lose. When they entered the ballroom, heads turned. Yoon Taeyang commanded attention simply by existing, his presence sharp and controlled, but Jasmine noticed eyes on her as well, assessment and curiosity, and some hostility from women who'd perhaps hoped to occupy the position she now filled. She kept her expression pleasant and neutral, her hand light on Taeyang's arm as they moved through the crowd. The evening unfolded exactly as Mrs. Park had predicted. Business associates greeted Taeyang with respectful formality, introducing their wives, making small talk about the charity's mission. Jasmine smiled, contributed appropriate comments, and observed everything. She noticed how certain men tensed when Taeyang approached, how others relaxed, how a few watched him with barely concealed calculation. She saw the security team distributed throughout the ballroom, recognizable to her now after weeks on the estate, where similar men patrolled constantly. She recognized the performance for what it was, everyone pretending civility while conducting assessments and negotiations in glances and carefully chosen words. During dinner, a businessman named Kim Jae-sung, who owned import-export companies that Jasmine suspected were fronts for smuggling, leaned close with wine on his breath. "You're very beautiful," he said in English, ignoring his wife beside him. "Taeyong is a lucky man to have found such a lovely companion. Mr. Yoon and I met through fortunate circumstances," Jasmine replied smoothly, her tone pleasant but distant. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to support his charitable interests." Kim's hand moved under the table toward her knee. Taeyong's hand was faster, catching the man's wrist with sudden pressure. "Kim," Taeyong said quietly, his voice iced despite the smile on his face. "You seem to have lost control of your hand. Allow me to help you relocate it to appropriate territory." Kim paled, withdrawing his hand quickly. "My apologies. Too much wine." "Of course," Taeyong said, releasing him. "Perhaps water would be wise. After dinner, find me in the East Gallery. We need to discuss your shipping schedules." The rest of the meal passed without incident, but Jasmine had seen something shift in Taeyong's expression when Kim had reached for her, something cold and dangerous beneath the polished exterior. He was possessive of his assets, she realized. She was his asset now. Anyone touching what belonged to Yoon Taeyong was taking a considerable risk. After the gala, in the car driving back to the estate, Taeyong spoke without looking at her. "If anyone makes you uncomfortable at these events, you will tell me immediately. You represent me. Disrespect toward you is disrespect toward me. That has consequences." "I handled it fine," Jasmine said. "You handled it professionally," Taeyong corrected. "But you shouldn't have to handle it at all. That's what I'm for." It was the first time he'd suggested his role extended beyond business convenience to something resembling actual protection. Jasmine studied his profile in the dim car, trying to understand this complicated man who spoke about respect and consequences in the same breath. A pattern developed over the following weeks. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times, Jasmine accompanied Taeyong to formal events. Gallery openings where she admired art she didn't quite understand. Business dinners where she made pleasant conversation while men discussed deals in veiled language. Charity functions where souls wealthy donated impressive amounts while networking for advantage. She became skilled at the performance, reading rooms instinctively, adapting her behavior to match the setting's requirements, becoming exactly what each situation needed her to be. Between events, she had freedom she hadn't experienced in years. She took dance classes at a professional studio in Gangnam, her body remembering joy as muscles relearned patterns. She visited her mother regularly, watching Sharon Bryant grow stronger on the new medication, color returning to her face, energy increasing. She explored Seoul properly for the first time, not rushing between jobs, but actually seeing the city, its palaces and markets and neighborhoods. The money Taeyong paid her accumulated in her account, $10,000 per month like clockwork, more wealth than she'd ever imagined having. And slowly, almost without noticing, she began to look forward to the events. Not for the events themselves, but for the time with Taeyong. He was demanding, but never cruel. Formal, but occasionally showing dry humor that surprised her into laughter. Controlled, but sometimes revealing glimpses of something more complex beneath the cold exterior. After events, he'd taken to asking if she was hungry, leading her to the main house kitchen, making simple ramen or calling for whatever Mrs. Park had left in the refrigerator. They'd eat in comfortable silence, the performative aspects falling away in the late-night quiet. 2 months after she'd signed the contract, after a particularly tedious corporate dinner, Taeyong made tea instead of ramen, carrying 2 cups to the kitchen's breakfast nook. They sat in the comfortable chairs, looking out over the estate's dark grounds. "You've adapted well," he said. "Better than I anticipated. Most people struggle with the duality required, the constant performance. You seem to manage it naturally. Dancers learn early that performance is survival," Jasmine said. "We perform through injuries, exhaustion, doubt. We smile through pain. This isn't so different. Just a different stage with different choreography." Taeyong sipped his tea, quiet for a moment. "My wife danced," he said finally. "Not professionally. Recreationally. She loved it. Took classes twice a week, even when she was 8 months pregnant. Said it made her feel free." It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife directly. Jasmine noticed the wedding photo still on his office desk, had seen the empty rooms in the main house that looked like they'd been closed off. What happened to her? She asked quietly. Taeyang's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, pain carefully controlled beneath the surface. Complications during delivery, he said, his voice flat with forced neutrality. Preeclampsia that became eclampsia. The doctors couldn't save either of them. Yuna died first. Our daughter died an hour later. I was in Tokyo negotiating a deal worth $50 million, building my empire, accumulating power. I returned to find my entire family gone. Jasmine's heart clenched. I'm sorry, she said, knowing the words were inadequate, but having nothing else to offer. I tell myself I was building security, Taeyang continued. Building power so nothing could threaten what mattered. But the irony is I was too focused on building to notice I was losing what I was supposedly protecting. I couldn't save them with all my money and power. I couldn't control what actually mattered. He looked at Jasmine directly. So I built more. Expanded operations. Took territory from rivals. Created a fortress of wealth and violence. Convinced myself if I controlled enough, maybe nothing could hurt me again. He set down his teacup with careful precision. Then I saw you dancing in that corridor. Just moving with joy despite circumstances, finding beauty in mopping a floor because you couldn't help yourself. And I remembered what it felt like to see joy. What it felt like to feel something other than cold calculation. He paused. That's why I brought you here. Not just for the practical reasons, though those are real, but because you reminded me that life contains more than business and revenge. Jasmine processed this vulnerability, this rare glimpse beneath the controlled exterior. She understood loss, different but equally shaped by death and medical bills. My father died when I was 12, she said. Heart attack, sudden. One day he was there, the next he was gone. Mom got sick 2 years later. I learned young that life doesn't wait for you to be ready before taking what matters. You adapt or you break. I chose adaptation. Taeyang met her eyes, recognition passing between them, shared understanding of grief and pragmatism and survival through control. We're similar, he said, both of us building walls around ourselves. Different materials, but same purpose. At least your walls are more comfortable than mine used to be, Jasmine said, gesturing at the expensive kitchen around them. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his sharp features briefly. Comfort is relative. Wealth doesn't prevent emptiness. He stood, collecting their cups. Thank you for listening, Ms. Bryant. I don't often discuss personal matters. Thank you for trusting me with them, Jasmine replied. After that conversation, something shifted between them. The formality remained in public, but privately Taeyang began asking about her day, her dance classes, her mother's progress. He'd inquire if she needed anything, remember small details she'd mentioned. When she finished a particularly difficult dance combination she'd been working on for weeks, she found a bottle of champagne waiting in the guest house with a note that said simply, Mrs. Park mentioned your progress. Well done. Jasmine found herself looking forward to the late-night kitchen visits, the quiet conversations that happened when the performance ended. When Yoon Taeyang became just Taeyang, the man beneath the crime boss facade. She learned his dry sense of humor, his unexpected kindness, his careful attention to those he considered his responsibility. She saw how he treated Mrs. Park with respect, how he ensured his security team had good medical coverage and fair compensation, how he handled business with cold efficiency, but personal matters with surprising warmth. But she also saw the darkness that came with his world. The coded phone conversations in multiple languages, switching between Korean, Japanese, and English. The late-night meetings with dangerous-looking men who arrived through the estate's back entrance. The night she noticed blood on his shirt cuff when he claimed he'd been at a construction site accident, his eyes daring her to question the obvious lie. The security footage she'd glimpsed once showing someone being forcibly removed from a property. Taeyang's expression cold as he gave orders she couldn't hear but could imagine. She was living in a dangerous world, protected by a dangerous man, complicit in activities she didn't understand and probably didn't want to. The comfort and security came with a price beyond the contract's explicit terms. She was becoming part of his empire, her presence helping legitimize his operations, her silence helping conceal whatever violence maintained his power. But her mother was thriving. Sharon Bryant had gained weight, her color improved, her energy returning. The specialist said the medication was working better than expected, that experimental treatments they were now able to access might extend her life by years. Jasmine held to that whenever the guilt threatened to overwhelm her, whenever she questioned what she'd become. Her mother would live. That had to be enough. 3 months after signing the contract, Jasmine and Taeyong attended a gallery opening in Gangnam, some contemporary artist whose work Jasmine found aggressively abstract. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease, making appropriate comments, Taeyong handling business, while Jasmine made his cold efficiency seem almost warm by her presence. Afterward, he asked if she wanted to see his favorite piece before they left. He led her to a large painting in a quieter gallery room, a Seoul cityscape at night, buildings lit like stars, the Han River reflecting light. "I bought this 5 years ago," he said, "before Yuna died. It reminds me that everything looks peaceful from a distance. But up close, the city is chaos and danger and struggle, beautiful and violent simultaneously. That's more honest than paintings that pretend the world is only one thing." Jasmine studied the painting, seeing what he meant. The distant beauty concealing closer complexity. "Like your world," she said. "Like everyone's world," Taeyong replied. "Some of us just acknowledge it more honestly than others." In the car returning to the estate, Jasmine realized with something like shock that she was happy. Not completely, not without complications, but genuinely happy in moments. She enjoyed the work, the performance aspects engaging her artistic sensibilities. She loved seeing her mother healthy. She appreciated the financial security, the comfort, the freedom from constant exhaustion. And she liked Taeyong, this complicated, dangerous man who'd seen her dancing and somehow decided she was worth acquiring. That realization was dangerous. She was supposed to maintain professional distance. The contract was business. Getting emotionally invested made her vulnerable, made the arrangement more complicated. But she couldn't help caring about him, noticing when he was tired, worrying when late-night meetings ran long, feeling protective when his enemies tested his operations. She was falling for her dangerous employer, and that was definitely not part of the contract's terms. The first warning came on a Tuesday afternoon in late autumn, 3 months after Jasmine had signed the contract. She was walking back from her dance class, the studio just 10 blocks from the Unistate in Gangnam, accompanied by one of Taeyang's security team as had become routine. The man, whose name was Min and who never spoke unless necessary, walked 3 paces behind her, professional and unobtrusive. Jasmine noticed the black sedan on the 3rd block. It pulled out from a side street as they passed, drove slowly behind them for 2 blocks, then turned off. She thought nothing of it initially. Seoul traffic was constant, cars everywhere. But something about the deliberate pace made her glance back. Min had noticed too. His posture had shifted, hand moving toward his jacket in a gesture Jasmine had learned meant he was reaching for a weapon. "Keep walking," he said quietly. "Natural pace. Don't look back again." Her heart rate increased. Is something wrong? Possibly. Just keep moving. They reached the estate without incident. Min escorted her through the gate, then immediately went to the security office. 20 minutes later, Mrs. Park appeared at the guest house, her expression more serious than usual. "Mr. Yoon would like to see you in his office," she said. "Now, please." Jasmine found Taeyong behind his desk in the main house, studying security monitor footage, his expression carved from ice. "Ms. Bryant," he said without preamble. "Min reported a vehicle following you from the dance studio. Black sedan, tinted windows, no plates visible. Did you notice anything unusual about the occupants or the vehicle itself?" "I only noticed it following us for 2 blocks, Jasmine said. "I didn't see inside." "Is this," she hesitated, "is this something I should be worried about?" Taeyang's dark eyes met hers, cold and assessing. "In my world, surveillance is the first step in threat assessment. Someone wants to know your patterns, your routines, your vulnerabilities. They're testing security, seeing how closely you're protected." He stood, moving around the desk toward her. "This could be rivals attempting to identify leverage against me. You've been visible at my side for 3 months now. That makes you a target." The word target sent ice through her veins. "What does that mean exactly? What would they do?" Taeyang's voice remained level, factual, which somehow made it worse. "Kidnapping is common. They'd take you, hold you for ransom, or use you as leverage to force compliance with their demands. Or they might harm you simply to send a message, to demonstrate they can reach what's mine. His jaw tightened slightly. Neither scenario is acceptable. He picked up his phone, spoke rapidly in Korean, voice sharp with authority. When he ended the call, he said, "Your security detail is being tripled effective immediately. You don't leave the estate without 2 armed guards minimum. All trips must be cleared through security in advance. Your dance classes will be relocated here. I'm having the gym in the East Wing converted to a proper studio. You stay on the property until this threat is assessed and neutralized." "I'm a prisoner now," Jasmine said, the word escaping before she could stop it. Taeyang's expression hardened. "You're protected. There's a difference. Prisoners have no choice. You chose this world when you signed the contract. The contract specifies that you comply with security protocols when threats arise. This is that compliance." "For how long?" Jasmine asked. "Until I determine it's safe," Taeyang said. "Until whoever is watching you understands that touching you means war with me. Until the message is sent clearly enough that no one dares test it." Over the next week, the surveillance continued. Different vehicles, always at a distance, always careful. The security team documented every sighting, traced registrations that led to dead ends and shell companies, identified the faction responsible as the Park Organization, rivals who controlled territory in Incheon and wanted to expand into Seoul. They saw Jasmine as a vulnerability, Taeyang's head of security explained. A way to hurt him without direct confrontation. Jasmine felt the walls closing in. She'd adapted to her new life, found freedom in the structure, but now that freedom contracted to the estate's boundaries. She couldn't visit her mother without military-grade escort. She couldn't take her dance classes. She couldn't walk through Seoul without feeling watched, assessed, targeted. The security team was professional but omnipresent, 3 men now accompanying her everywhere, guns visible beneath their jackets. Taeyang became more focused, more cold, spending long hours in meetings with his security chiefs and business associates, making calls in multiple languages, his entire operation mobilizing to identify and eliminate the threat. He barely spoke to Jasmine during this time, his attention consumed by protecting his assets and punishing those who dared threaten them. On the 8th day, Jasmine made a mistake. She'd been scheduled to visit her mother, but that morning Sharon Bryant called saying she wasn't feeling well, asking if Jasmine could come earlier, her voice weak in a way that triggered every protective instinct Jasmine possessed. Without thinking clearly, without following proper protocol, Jasmine told her security detail she needed to leave immediately, grabbing her jacket and heading for the car. The team was professional, but the shift change had just occurred, coordination slightly disrupted by the timing. 2 guards accompanied her in the primary vehicle, with the backup car supposed to follow in 5 minutes once the new team suited up. In retrospect, Jasmine would recognize this as exactly the kind of gap enemies waited for, the brief vulnerability in otherwise tight security. But in the moment, worried about her mother, she just wanted to go. They made it 8 blocks before the first vehicle struck their car from the side, a deliberate collision at an intersection, hard enough to deploy airbags, but not hard enough to cause serious injury. The second vehicle blocked them from behind. 3 men emerged from each vehicle, moving with practiced efficiency, guns drawn but not yet firing. The neighborhood was too public for gunfire, too many witnesses, but the threat was clear and immediate. Jasmine's guards reacted instantly, one radioing for backup, while the other pushed her down in the back seat, his body covering hers. "Stay down," he ordered. "Do not move. Do not look up." The window beside her exploded inward, safety glass showering over them. Hands reached through, grabbing her arm, her jacket, trying to drag her through the broken window. Jasmine screamed, pure animal terror, kicking against the grip, her guard fighting to hold her while reaching for his weapon. The attacker got a better hold, yanking hard enough to pull her halfway through the window frame, broken glass cutting into her side. Then gunfire erupted, sharp cracks splitting the air, and suddenly the hands released her. She fell back into the car, her guard pulling her fully inside, covering her again as more shots fired outside. Through the chaos, she heard shouting in Korean, running footsteps, a vehicle speeding away. Then silence, heavy and shocked. The guard slowly lifted off her. "Stay here," he said, his voice tight. "Backup is 30 seconds out. Do not leave this vehicle." But Jasmine was shaking too hard to move anyway. adrenaline flooding her system, making everything sharp and terrible. Her side burned where the glass had cut through her jacket. Her arm ached where the attacker had grabbed her, would probably bruise. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She'd been seconds from being taken, from being dragged into a vehicle and disappearing into whatever horror Taeyang's rivals had planned. The backup team arrived, 3 vehicles, armed men securing the perimeter. Someone opened her door carefully, spoke gently. "Ms. Bryant, you're safe. We need to get you off the street." She let them help her out, her legs unsteady, everything feeling unreal. The intersection was chaos, their damaged car blocking traffic, the attackers' vehicles abandoned, police sirens approaching in the distance. One of the men who tried to grab her lay on the pavement, shot, not moving. Jasmine looked away quickly, bile rising in her throat. They put her in a different vehicle, this one armored, she realized, heavy and secure. The drive back to the estate took 6 minutes. The head of security called Taeyang the moment they were moving, voice crisp and professional, reporting the situation. "Yes, sir. She's unharmed. Minor cuts from glass." They attempted extraction at the intersection near her mother's apartment. 2 guards maintained position, eliminated 1 attacker, others fled. Backup secured scene. "Police are arriving now. We'll handle the cleanup." The phone switched to speaker. Taeyang's voice filled the car, cold and controlled, but with an undercurrent of fury Jasmine had never heard before. "Bring her directly to the main house. Medical team is standing by. Double the perimeter security. Lock down the estate completely. No one enters or leaves without my explicit authorization." He paused. "And someone find out which park lieutenant organized this. I want a name in the next hour." They brought her to the main house, to a room she hadn't seen before, clearly set up for medical situations, examination table, and supplies organized with precision. A doctor checked her immediately, cleaning the glass cuts on her side, none deep enough for stitches, wrapping her ribs carefully, examining the bruises forming on her arm where the attacker had grabbed her. "Minor injuries," the doctor said. "Physically she'll be fine. Shock and psychological impact will need monitoring." Then Taeyang arrived, striding into the room with barely controlled violence in every movement. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed, but his eyes were molten fury. The doctor and security team evacuated immediately, leaving them alone. Taeyang moved to stand directly in front of where Jasmine sat on the examination table, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "You violated protocol," he said, voice low and dangerous. "You left without proper coordination, without waiting for full security detail, without clearance. You created a vulnerability that nearly got you killed." "My mother was sick," Jasmine said, her voice shaking. "She needed me. I wasn't thinking about any of this. I just needed to see her." "Your mother is fine," Taeyang bit out. "I had someone check. She has a minor cold. Nothing life-threatening. But you nearly died because you couldn't follow simple safety protocols." His hands gripped the examination table on either side of her, caging her in. "Do you understand what they would have done to you? Do you understand what I would have had to do to get you back?" "I understand," Jasmine whispered. "I'm sorry. I didn't think." "No," Taeyang agreed, his face inches from hers. "You didn't think. You put yourself at risk. You put my men at risk. You created exactly the situation I've spent 8 days trying to prevent." His voice dropped lower, something raw beneath the anger. "You could have been taken, hurt, killed, used against me, lost." The last word carried weight beyond business calculation. Jasmine met his eyes, saw beneath the fury to genuine fear, the kind that came from nearly losing something valuable. "You were scared," she said, surprised. "Not just angry. Actually scared." "Of course I was scared," Taeyang said, some of the cold control cracking. "Your mind to protect. That's not just contractual obligation. That's..." He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. "When I received the call that you'd been attacked, that they'd nearly taken you, I felt something I haven't felt since Yuna died. Terror. Absolute terror that I'd failed again, that someone under my protection would be lost because I wasn't thorough enough, wasn't ruthless enough, wasn't there." His hands moved from the table to her face, cupping it gently despite the tension in his body. "You will not take risks like that again," he said, voice rough. "You will follow every protocol. You will prioritize safety over convenience. You will understand that your life has value beyond what the contract specifies. Do you understand me? Jasmine nodded, unable to speak, her heart pounding for different reasons now. The intensity in his expression, the careful way his hands held her face, the rawness in his voice, all of it spoke to something far beyond employer protecting an asset. Good, Taeyong said. He pulled back, the professional distance reasserting itself though his hands shook slightly. The park lieutenant who organized this attack has been identified. His name is Lee Sang-min. I'm handling it personally tonight. He'll be questioned about the extent of their surveillance and plans. Then he and his entire command structure will be eliminated. This ends now. What does that mean? Jasmine asked. Eliminated. It means exactly what it sounds like, Taeyong said flatly. They threatened what's mine. That requires response so severe that no one ever considers doing it again. By morning, the park organization will no longer be operational in any capacity. Their territory will be absorbed. Their leadership will have vanished. Every faction in Seoul will understand that touching you means absolute destruction. He moved toward the door, then paused. Rest tonight. Mrs. Park will stay with you. Tomorrow we'll discuss additional security measures. And Ms. Bryant, he looked back at her, his expression softer for just a moment. I'm glad you're safe. Very glad. After he left, Mrs. Park arrived to escort Jasmine to the guest house, making tea, sitting with her while the shock slowly wore off. You understand now, Mrs. Park said gently. The danger that comes with Mr. Yoon's world. This is why security is absolute. Why protocols exist. He has many enemies who would use you to hurt him. I understand, Jasmine said. She touched the bandage on her side, felt the ache in her arm. I really understand now. She tried to sleep, but couldn't, too wired with adrenaline and fear and confusion. Around midnight she got up, paced the guest house, eventually sitting by the window watching the main house. Lights were on in Taeyang's office. She wondered what he was doing, what handling it personally meant, what violence was being enacted in her name. He returned at dawn. Jasmine saw his car pull through the gates as sunrise painted the sky pink and gold. He emerged looking tired, his suit disheveled in a way she'd never seen, and when he glanced toward the guest house, she was standing at the window. Their eyes met across the distance. He held her gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked into the main house. An hour later, he texted her. It's handled. The threat is eliminated. You're safe now. Come to the main house for breakfast if you're awake. Jasmine showered, dressed carefully, walked across the grounds feeling the security team's presence but trying to ignore it. She found Taeyong in the kitchen, making coffee, looking exhausted but satisfied. Sit, he said. I'll make eggs. They ate in silence for several minutes, the comfortable quiet they developed over months of late-night meals. Finally, Jasmine asked, is it really over? The threat. The park organization is no longer operational, Taeyong said. Their leadership has been disbanded. Their territory absorbed by factions more amenable to peaceful coexistence. No one will threaten you again. The message has been sent clearly enough. What did you do? Jasmine asked quietly. Last night. Where did you go? Taeyong met her eyes steadily. I did what was necessary to protect what's mine. That's all you need to know. The specifics would only burden you with knowledge you don't want. Jasmine absorbed that, recognizing he'd killed people last night. Probably multiple people, probably with extreme violence if his goal was to send a message. She should be horrified, should be repulsed, but should be questioning what kind of man she'd agreed to work for. Instead, she felt overwhelming relief. The threat was gone. She was safe. Her mother was safe. Taeyong had done exactly what he'd promised in the contract, protected her with whatever means necessary, and she couldn't regret the methods when they'd ensured her survival. Thank you, she said, for protecting me, for making sure I'm safe. You don't thank me for keeping my promises, Taeyong said, but you're welcome regardless. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. You scared me yesterday, Jasmine. When I thought they might take you, might hurt you, I realized something I've been avoiding acknowledging. What? Jasmine asked, her voice barely a whisper. That you've become more than a contract to me, Taeyong said. More than an arrangement or an asset or a business decision. You matter. Specifically you, not just your function. Losing you would. He paused, searching for words. Would hurt in ways I thought I'd built walls against. The admission hung between them, raw and honest, changing everything. Taeyong's hand remained covering hers on the kitchen table, warm and solid, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. The admission hung between them, that she mattered beyond the contract, beyond business calculation, beyond the carefully maintained professional distance they'd constructed over 3 months. Jasmine stared at their joined hands, her heart pounding. This was dangerous territory. The contract specified employment terms, not emotional entanglement. She was supposed to remain professional, maintain boundaries, remember this was business. But her heart hadn't received that memo. Somewhere between late-night Ramian and vulnerability exchanges and watching him protect her with ruthless efficiency, she'd stopped seeing Yoon Taeyong as her employer and started seeing him as just Taeyong, the man who made her feel safe and seen and valued in ways she hadn't experienced in years. I scared myself too, Jasmine said quietly. When they grabbed me, when I thought they'd take me, my first thought wasn't about the contract or my mother or the money. It was that I'd never see you again, that I'd never have another late-night conversation in this kitchen, that whatever this is between us would be over before I could understand what it meant. Taeyong's fingers tightened on hers. What does it mean to you, he asked. This thing between us. Jasmine took a breath, recognizing the risk in honesty, but unable to maintain pretense anymore. It means I care about you. Not as my employer or the man who pays my salary, or even as the person keeping my mother alive, though all of those things are true. I care about you as Taeyong, the man who saw me dancing and decided I was worth knowing, the man who makes terrible ramen at 2 a.m., the man who still keeps his wife's photo on his desk because love doesn't just disappear when someone dies. She met his eyes. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. The contract doesn't include emotional attachment. But I do. I care about you more than professional distance allows. Taeyong stood abruptly, pulling her up with him, his hands moving to frame her face the way he'd done in the medical room yesterday. The difference was the gentleness now, the way his thumbs brushed her cheekbones with reverence rather than urgency. I told myself this was purely practical, he said, his voice rough with emotion he'd spent 3 months controlling. That I needed someone presentable at formal events. Someone trustworthy, who could move through my world without creating problems. I told myself it was business when I arranged for your mother's care. Business when I had the guest house prepared perfectly for your comfort. Business when I checked security footage every night to make sure you'd return safely. He leaned his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her face. But it stopped being business somewhere around the 2nd week when you laughed at something I said, and I realized I'd been trying to make you laugh. When I started finding excuses to see you beyond required events. When I sat in my office at midnight staring at security monitors just to watch you reading in your living room, because it made my empty house feel less empty. I've been lying to myself about what this is, what you've become to me. What have I become? Jasmine whispered. Something essential, Taeyong said. Someone I think about constantly. Someone whose safety matters more than business interests, whose happiness I find myself prioritizing over profit, whose presence transforms spaces I've occupied alone for 3 years into something almost like home. He pulled back slightly to look at her properly. I told myself after Yuna died that I'd never let anyone matter this much again. That caring was vulnerability I couldn't afford. That building walls was safer than building connections. Then you appeared dancing in a corridor, and every wall I'd built started cracking. Jasmine's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. I'm terrified, she admitted. Of this. Of caring this much. Of what it means that I'm falling for someone whose world involves violence and danger and blood on shirt cuffs. I should be smart enough to maintain distance. Should remember this started as transaction. Should protect myself from getting hurt when this inevitably ends. What if it doesn't end? Taeyong said. What if instead of fighting this, instead of pretending it's just business, we acknowledge what's actually happening here? That somewhere between the contract signing and last night's terror, we became something more than employer and employee. Something that matters beyond professional arrangement. His hands slid from her face to her waist, pulling her closer, eliminating the careful distance they'd maintained for months. I want you, he said simply. Not as an asset or a companion or hired presence at events. I want you as mine. I want to come home and find you here. I want late-night conversations and your laughter and your dance classes in my converted gym and your mother healthy, because I insured it. I want you in my world not as decoration, but as partner. As someone who belongs with me. Jasmine's breath caught. You're asking for more than the contract specifies. I'm asking you to tear up the contract, Taeyong said. To make this real instead of transactional. To stop performing and start actually being with me. His voice dropped lower, intimate and intense. You're already mine in every way that matters. I just want you to acknowledge it. Accept it. Choose it freely instead of out of necessity. The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her. Should have triggered warnings about control and power imbalances and dangerous men who claimed ownership. Instead, it sent heat through her chest, made her heart race with something that felt like relief. Because he was right. She was his. Had been since he'd pulled her into his world and treated her struggles like they mattered. Since he'd protected her with absolute ruthlessness. Since he'd revealed his own wounds and trusted her with his vulnerability. Then say it, Jasmine said, her hands moving to his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath expensive fabric. Say what you actually mean instead of dancing around it. Taeyang's eyes went dark, intense, his grip on her waist tightening. You're mine, he said, the words definitive and claiming. Not because of some contract or financial arrangement. Because I claim you. Because you fit into spaces in my life I didn't know were empty. Because losing you yesterday made me realize I can't lose you at all. You're mine, Jasmine. Mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to keep. And you're mine, Jasmine replied, surprising herself with the fierceness in her voice. The man beneath the crime boss. The person who's kind when no one's watching. The broken pieces that match my broken pieces. You're mine as much as I'm yours. Taeyong made a sound low in his throat, something between relief and triumph. And then his mouth was on hers, kissing her with desperate intensity. 3 months of careful distance and professional boundaries and denied attraction exploded into heat and need and claiming. His hands tangled in her natural hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, bodies pressed together without space between them. The kiss tasted like coffee and promise and the future neither of them had planned but both wanted. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Taeyong rested his forehead against hers again. This changes everything, he said. Good, Jasmine replied. I was tired of pretending. Over the next week, they navigated the shift from arrangement to relationship with the same careful attention they'd applied to formal events. In public, nothing changed. Jasmine still accompanied Taeyong to business dinners and gallery openings, still made appropriate conversation, and moved through his world with practiced grace. But privately, the walls had come down completely. She spent evenings in the main house instead of the guest house. They cooked together, ate together, talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her stories about building his empire, the choices he'd made, the violence that came with power. She shared her dreams from before her mother got sick, the dancer she'd been, the future she'd imagined. He was still dangerous. His business still involved activities she didn't ask about, and he didn't volunteer. But she understood now that his darkness served protective purposes, that the violence was directed at those who threatened what he valued, that the man beneath the crime boss facade was capable of tenderness and loyalty and love even if he struggled to name it. 2 weeks after the attempted kidnapping, after an art gallery opening where they'd maintained perfect professional facades while trading glances that promised later intimacy, Taeyong led Jasmine to his private office in the main house. She'd been in this space before for the contract signing, but it felt different now. Less intimidating. More like a room belonging to someone she knew intimately rather than a crime boss's domain. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer, handed it to her. Open it, he said. Inside were legal documents, dense with Korean and English text. Marriage registration paperwork. Jasmine looked up, heart pounding. What is this? A proposal, Taeyong said, moving to stand in front of her. Not a romantic one. I'm not particularly skilled at romance. But a practical one that reflects what I want our future to be. He took her hand. I want you as my wife. Legally. Permanently. Not because the contract requires it, but because I've spent 4 months learning what it feels like to have you in my life, and I don't want to risk losing that. He continued, his thumb rubbing circles on her palm. In my world, marriage provides protections that arrangements can't. A wife has legal standing, inheritance rights, protections under Korean law that companions don't. If something happens to me, you'd inherit my legitimate businesses. You'd be financially secure for life. More importantly, you'd be recognized as family, which in my world means untouchable. Rivals know that killing a boss's wife brings total war. that the retaliation would be absolute and devastating. It makes you safer than any security detail could. This is very practical reasoning for a marriage proposal, Jasmine said, though her heart was racing and she knew what answer she'd give. I'm a practical man, Taeyong replied. But the practical reasons aren't the real ones. The real reason is I love you. I'm not good at saying it. I showed it by arranging your mother's care, by protecting you with everything I have, by eliminating threats so thoroughly no one will dare test again. But the words matter too. I love you, Jasmine. I want you as my wife not just as protection, but as partner. As the person I build my future with. Jasmine felt tears on her cheeks, happiness overwhelming her carefully maintained composure. I love you too, she said. Even though you're dangerous and your world is dark, and I'm probably insane for falling for a crime boss who saw me mopping floors and decided to acquire me like an asset. You were never just an asset, Taeyong said. You were possibility. You were joy I'd forgotten existed. You were everything I'd stopped letting myself want. He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple but elegant, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. This was my grandmother's. The only piece of family jewelry I kept after my parents died. I want you to have it. Want you to wear it as symbol of what we're choosing together. Jasmine held out her left hand, trembling slightly. Taeyong slid the ring on. Perfect fit, the sapphire catching light from the desk lamp. Yes, she said. Yes to marriage. Yes to permanence. Yes to building a future with you however complicated and dangerous it might be. He pulled her close, kissed her slowly, thoroughly, acclaiming that was also promise. We'll register the marriage this week, he said. Then next month, a proper celebration where Seoul's elite can witness that you're officially Mrs. Yoon. Your mother will be here for it. I'm having her apartment upgraded to something larger, fully staffed, best medical team permanently assigned. She's family now. My responsibility. You already arranged all that, Jasmine said. Not really a question. I arrange everything, Taeyong replied with the hint of smile. That's what I do. I identify what matters and ensure it's protected and supported with every resource available. You matter. Your mother matters because she matters to you. Therefore, I've restructured parts of my empire to accommodate these new priorities. He moved to the window, looking out over the estate grounds. I'm also making changes you should know about. Consolidating operations, moving more business into legitimate ventures. The construction company is expanding. I'm investing in real estate development, tech startups, clean businesses that don't require violence to maintain. In 5 years, maybe less, I intend to be mostly legitimate businessman rather than crime boss. The transition will be complex and dangerous, but I'm building something that can last, something I can pass on without shame. Because of me, Jasmine asked. Because of you, Taeyong confirmed. Because I want a future that's more than power and violence and empty houses. Because you deserve a husband who isn't constantly one step from prison or assassination. Because I've realized that the empire I built as fortress after Yuna died was just elaborate prison. You showed me there's more to life than control and revenge. I want to build something new, something better. With you. Jasmine joined him at the window, slipping her hand into his, the sapphire ring solid and real on her finger. For months ago I was cleaning these floors at midnight, she said, dancing when I thought no one watched. Desperate and exhausted with impossible choices and no good options. Now I'm standing here as your fiancé, my mother is healthy and cared for. I dance in a studio you built specifically for me, and you're talking about building a future together. Life changes quickly sometimes, Taeyong said. The question is whether you regret the changes. Not even slightly, Jasmine replied. I should probably feel guilty about falling for someone who eliminated an entire criminal organization to protect me. Should worry about what it says about my morals that I find your possessive claiming romantic rather than concerning. But I don't. You saved me. You saw me when I was invisible. You made my impossible situation possible. I'm not going to apologize for loving you because the method of our meeting was unconventional. They married in a quiet civil ceremony 1 week later. Just Mrs. Park and 2 security personnel as witnesses. Jasmine in a simple white dress, Taeyong in one of his perfect dark suits. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. They signed the documents making it legal and binding, and Jasmine became Mrs. Yoon Taeyong with all the protection and permanence that entailed. Her mother attended the public celebration a month later. hosted at one of Seoul's most exclusive hotels. 500 guests, including every important figure in Seoul's business and social circles. Sharon Bryant cried watching her daughter dance with her new husband, overwhelmed by how much had changed, how much her daughter's impossible job had transformed into actual partnership with someone who clearly treasured her. Jasmine had told her mother an edited version of the truth, that the arrangement had evolved into genuine relationship, that she'd fallen for her employer and he'd fallen for her. Sharon didn't need to know about crime syndicates and kidnapping attempts and blood on shirt cuffs. She just needed to know her daughter was safe and loved and building a future that included her. 6 months after the wedding, Jasmine practiced in her dance studio in the main house, the guest house abandoned now that she'd moved permanently into Taeyang's space. She worked through a complicated combination, music filling the large room, her body remembering joy through movement. She didn't notice Taeyang enter, didn't realize he was watching until the music ended, and she turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, expression soft in a way reserved only for her. "You still dance like you're performing for thousands," he said, "even when it's just me watching." "Old habits," Jasmine replied, slightly breathless. "Once a performer, always a performer." "I like watching you," Taeyang said, moving into the studio. "When I saw you that first night on the security footage, you were dancing, and I realized I'd forgotten what joy looked like. You reminded me. Every day since then, you've continued reminding me." He pulled her close despite her sweaty workout clothes, kissed her forehead. "I built an empire thinking power would protect what mattered. Then I lost everything despite all that power. After Yuna died, I built walls thinking isolation would prevent more loss. Then you appeared dancing in a corridor, and every wall I'd built started cracking. Now I have you. Your mother is thriving downstairs having tea with Mrs. Park. My businesses are transitioning toward legitimate operations, and I'm building something real instead of just fortress against pain." Jasmine wrapped her arms around him, the sapphire ring catching light from the studio windows. "I started cleaning floors at midnight to save my mother's life. I gave up Juilliard and my dreams and everything I planned for my future. I thought I'd sacrificed everything. Turns out I was just on a different path to a different future. One I couldn't have imagined, but somehow fits better than the one I planned." She thought about that night 4 months ago, dancing alone at 1 a.m., thinking no one watched, desperate and exhausted with impossible mathematics and deferred dreams. She thought about the contract she'd signed, selling herself into what she'd thought was cage but turned out to be door to future she'd never imagined wanting. She thought about how Yoon Taeyong had seen her dancing and decided she was worth acquiring, worth protecting, worth loving. She was no longer the invisible cleaner mopping floors in the middle of the night. She was Mrs. Yoon Taeyong, wife of one of Seoul's most powerful men, partner in building empire that was slowly transforming from criminal organization into legitimate business dynasty. She danced in a private studio in a mansion she called home. Her mother lived 3 floors down, healthy and safe and cared for by the best medical team money could buy. She stood beside a dangerous man who'd proven his devotion through protection so absolute that rivals wouldn't dare threaten her again. The Korean crime boss who'd seen a cleaner dancing at 1 a.m. had brought her to him with a command. Now he held her in their home, in their life, in their future that was secured by his power and her choice to accept everything that came with him. "You're mine," Taeyong murmured against her hair, the possession claim that had become their private language. "And you're mine," Jasmine replied, the response that made the claiming mutual, equal, chosen. "Forever," Taeyong said, making it promise. "Forever," Jasmine agreed, making it truth. They stood together in the dance studio, the crime boss and the former cleaner, the dangerous man and the woman who'd reminded him how to feel, building a future from impossible beginning, proving that sometimes the strangest paths led to exactly where you needed to be.